Yeah, what's going on, y'all? Thank you for coming to my channel. My name is Wally, and you are now tuned into Playboy Hustlers TV.
Hey, this the king of melodies beat.
Yeah, man, look, I'm back with the truth teller himself. You already know who that is. If you don't and you're new to my channel, well, that is Mr. Thomas Sowell himself, all right? You know he's always dropping some bombshells out here, you hear me? So look, man, this one right here is called The Real Reason Why Asians Are More Successful Than Westerners, all right? So with that being said, I'm going to stop wasting your time. Let's go ahead and press play. And before I do that, if you're trying to support the channel, go into the link in my description where you could go ahead and buy me a coffee. And you can also join my membership at my Patreon account, all right? Let's go ahead and press play and see what he's talking about.
Now, what about family structure, Tom? Again, I'm quoting you. Most black children were being raised in two-parent families in 1960. 30 years after the liberal welfare state, the great majority of black children were being raised by single parents.
Yes.
How does that, by the way, we should note that Patrick Moynihan publishes the Moynihan Report in 1965.
Yes.
And he's alarmed because the illegitimacy rate among black families is 25% then. Now, among whites, it's over a third.
Yes.
Hispanics, it's over half. And among African Americans, it's over 70%. What's going on there?
Well, this is, again, this too, you find the same thing in Britain, you find it in France and Norway, you find it in the Western world. In fact,
The dissolution of the family structure.
Oh yeah, there are any number of Western nations where 40% of the children are raised with only one parent.
Right.
Word.
At the extremes, compared to Asian countries, at the extremes, Iceland, it's 2 out of 3 children born are raised in a single-parent home. In South Korea, it's 1 out of 66.
Wow. Wow. And so what, that's the welfare state? What?
Yes.
It is.
You're creating a situation where if the first of all, you're creating a situation where if the man stays there, the government will not give the woman welfare.
You hear this right here? Wow. The irony, man. Here you are thinking they're helping you. All they are doing is hurting the people. If we were to get rid of welfare and people really had to go out there and grind, listen, man, the musical chairs would stop immediately, you hear me? If you don't know what musical chairs mean, you know, the jumping around from relationship, from wife to husband, husband to wife, all that type of thing, you know?
The government will not give the woman welfare, and if he leaves, it will. And so they're paying. When you pay people not to get married, more people don't get married.
Right. Okay. So what would have happened if Lyndon Johnson, instead of becoming a liberal, had remained a crusty, tough, skeptical Texas conservative,
yes,
which is certainly the way he started his career. If Lyndon Johnson had embraced the constrained vision instead of instituting the war on poverty and the Great Society and so forth, what would the country look like today?
A lot better. You would not have the same rates for crime and so on. Because, you see, you can't have a welfare state in a democratic country unless you first have a welfare state vision. And when you buy all the assumptions of that vision, then you're buying a lot of trouble. One of the episodes I think epitomized it was in France in this case, that there were knife attacks by various people from North Africa against Chinese people in some suburb of Paris. And one of the things that the attackers said, you know, that why are you attacking the Chinese? And it wasn't because of anything the Chinese had done to them. He said, they have nice clothes and big cars. That's not fair. I mean, that's, you know, egalitarianism as a philosophy is one thing, but the actual consequences of it mean things like resenting other people's good fortune.
Right. And that's happening today, right now. People resent you for having good things.
All right, so one response to the gap, again, I return to this gap between African Americans and other Americans, affirmative action.
Yes.
Which brings us back to your alma mater, Harvard. According to
I'll never live it down.
You'll never live it down, yes. You once told me that the principal benefit of a Harvard degree was never again having to be impressed by anybody who had a Harvard degree. Is that right?
Absolutely.
All right. So these are figures that were published in the Harvard Crimson, the student newspaper. In the Harvard class of 2019, these are the kids who will be graduating next June, the average SAT score for black students was 2149. By the way, these are all good scores, but for black students, 2149, white students, 2218, Asian students, 2300. Well, now that must be reasonable because it's taking place at Harvard, the seat of reason.
Well, that wasn't quite how I described it when I was there.
Affirmative action. Is that we ought not to be doing this?
You know, there are various laws and policies that benefit one group at the expense of another. But I think affirmative action has the distinction of being one that it harms everybody, though in different ways. And so
like a domino effect, basically. It sounds good on the surface.
There's a lot of evidence that there are black kids who have all the qualifications to be successes in college, who nevertheless are failures because they are systematically mismatched with institutions whose standards they don't meet, even though they may meet the standards of 80 or 90% of the colleges in America. I remember first aware of this when I was teaching at Cornell. And I found that half the black students at Cornell were on some kind of academic probation. And so I went over to the administration building and looked up the SATs of these students. The average black student at Cornell at that time scored at the 75th percentile.
And guess what? How many teachers you know going to do something like what he did? He went below the surface. Beneath it, he wanted to see what's going on, the root problem. This is how you do it. I would have loved to learn from this guy, like in actual real time in school, you heard?
Which is pretty darn good.
Yes.
Anybody who got lessons from Thomas Sowell, man, listen, you've been blessed. Remember I told you.
The 75th percentile.
Which is pretty darn good.
Yes. And so that means that in most colleges in this country, they would have no trouble, and many of them would be on the dean's list. But at Cornell, the average liberal arts student at that time was in the 99th percentile. And when you're teaching the students like that, you teach at a pace that most people of any race cannot keep up with. And it was always complained that I was assigning all kinds of reading, but heck, I'm teaching kids who are in the top 1%. They can keep up with the reading that I'm assigning.
So Cornell was taking very talented black kids and spending 4 years teaching them to feel inadequate.
Yes, and succeeding at that.
Fire, man, I'm telling you. Teachers like this, you gotta appreciate. Not too many teachers gonna do what he did, you understand what I mean? They'll just keep getting that check, they can care less. With that being said, if you like what you saw, don't forget to hit that like, leave a comment, express your thoughts, subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to hit the notification bell. Like I mentioned earlier, don't forget, man, if you wanna join my Patreon, information is in the description, alright? And if you wanna support the channel, you can do so by buying me a coffee. I will see you guys on the next one. Love, y'all.